All right, it's time for ball. He is ESPN's Tom Luginbill. I'm Ryan Brown. The show presented by MyBookie.ag. Code next round when you sign on at MyBookie.ag. You will get that sign-on bonus up to $1,000 when you sign up by using code next round. MyBookie.ag. Code next round. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag. What's happening, Lugs? How are you?
I'm good, man. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all that good stuff.
Yeah, buddy. Did you get it? Did you get what you wanted for Christmas? Were you?
I
Were you
did.
a
I
good
was.
boy?
I was on the nice list the whole entire year.
How about that? Is that a change for you?
Yes, that's usually on a daily basis.
You have to check every day with Center, right?
Yeah.
But you made it through another year. That's great. I want to start. We'll talk some recruiting signing day winners, but you got to lead the show with this. I saw the video of you seeing young Quade Luginbill and the commitment to Eastern Kentucky. So I know you're a proud dad covering your son on National Signing Day.
Yeah, and I didn't know I was going to be doing that. Matt Schick, my co-host, actually reached out to my wife and said, "Hey, can you take a photo of Quade at his ceremony at school?" And then got together with our producer, and we were in our last 8 or 9 minutes of the show, so I didn't know it was coming. And so yeah, really nice of those folks to do it. Really excited for him. I mean, you get a chance to play college football. Like I always tell them, like the bus does not leave without the long snapper, dude.
That's right.
So just always remember that. So no, he's pumped up, and he's going to enroll in early May for 2 summer sessions before the fall. So we're excited for him.
Yeah, and if you make it work, I mean, when you get to the NFL, there's one long snapper on that roster. You're the guy. You're the starter if you're on the roster.
That's right. That's exactly right. They make a lot of money.
That's right. And it's amazing to me. Like I know Carson Tinker pretty well that snapped at Alabama, and he was in the NFL for a good bit with Jacksonville primarily. And I mean, it's just amazing. All those guys are good. Like, you know, it's a fraction of a second of the ball getting to the holder or the punter that makes the difference when you're trying to compare those two guys.
It totally is. And I mean, so like Quade was a 4-star long snapper by Coles. Now, what did that mean? I don't really know. I know that he was recruited, as most long snappers are, as a preferred walk-on at some Power 5 and Group of 5 schools. But he had some scholarship offers, including Eastern Kentucky, to get his school paid for. And so I think a lot of it, you're right, it's a split second, whether it's short snaps, punt snaps, and it's not just like people don't realize it's not just getting it there on time. It's the placement of it. It's actually the revolutions of the ball, so that when they hit the hands of the holder or the punter, that the laces are up or the laces are out, and they can create that timing. I don't really understand it, but it's fun to watch it instructed by people who are really dialed into it, and all the little nuances to it that I know the times. I know you're supposed to be below this time and below this time, but there's a lot more to it than I actually ever thought there was.
Yeah, I mean, I've been told before, like the really good guys in the NFL, the holder on the field goal, he has to spin the ball the same amount every time. It hits his hands to where he puts it down, and it's the same spin every time. He's not always having to, judge how much to spin it. If it's snapped right, it's the same spin every time. It blows my mind that you could deliver the ball that way.
Those guys are in like a completely different league too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, those are guys that will play for 15, 17 years if they stay healthy. And like it's like you said with the holder and the spin, it's like right-footed punter, the ball's like directly at their right abdomen or right hip, and when it hits their hands, the laces are up on top. It's like, how you doing that from 14 yards away, man?
It's amazing.
It is amazing. So
well, good for him.
We'll see if it works out. Yeah, man, I appreciate it.
Congrats to Quade. Good kid, and he's going to go get some college paid for playing football, and that is certainly good for mom and dad, and good for him as well. All right, let's pick up one of the last balls we did prior to Lugabill getting loaded down with a bunch of bowl games and signing day. We looked at the opposite matchups of these first two things we're going to talk about. So let's talk about Alabama's defense when Michigan has the football. We look the other way around when Bama has the ball. Let's talk about that Michigan offense against Bama's defense. So there were times this year, specifically Penn State, where Michigan didn't even think about throwing the football. I don't think anybody thinks they can have that type of game plan against Alabama's defense.
No, I don't think they can either. And listen, are we willing to admit that the reality is Michigan's not very good on offense?
Yeah,
they're
agree.
Not very good on offense. They're not explosive. They don't really scare you in any way. The offensive line is the focal point of the entire – obviously the entire offense and what they want to be and what they want to do. How about this? The last 3 games of the season, they're averaging 281 yards of total offense. That's it. There's only 15 teams in college football at the FBS level that were worse than that. 15, that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so then you start to ask yourself, well, aside from Penn State, who have they played in that league? Ohio State, obviously, Penn State, and then Iowa. Who's any good on defense? And you start to look at some of the numbers for Michigan, and you realize there's not a lot of great defensive play. Then why isn't the offensive production better? Because you're right, lining up and saying, okay, we're gonna run it 29 consecutive times. Number one, I couldn't believe they did that against Penn State, but I do not envision them being able to do that against Alabama. I think that Alabama is going to be a faster football team than any team that they have played all year long. And Michigan doesn't want to be a drop back passing team. They want to be able to run the football at will and then come off of play action with everything that entails. Well, that tells me that Michigan has to win on early downs. Michigan has to win, yes, on offense, on early downs, running the football. Can they consistently do that? I don't know, but it is not in Michigan's best interest to have to drop back and throw the football to try to win this game.
Yeah, so that's the other option is you throw it, and I don't know if people paid attention to the All-American teams, but both those corners, Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terrion Arnold, are All-Americans, and there are people that are talking about Arnold has actually become the better NFL prospect than Kool-Aid McKinstry, who teams were not even throwing at to start the year.
Yeah.
They were trying to pick on Arnold, and he's played himself potentially, and I know this is not what we're here to talk about, where he goes drafted. I'm just making a point. You're talking about 2 first-round corners potentially in that Alabama defensive backfield.
Yeah, and Terrion Arnold can line up and play anywhere. I mean, that's the thing. He saved them against Texas A&M on the road when they went down at safety. I would argue that they have 3 potential first-rounders because Caleb Downs is going to be one.
Right.
And Nick Saban has said it's the best defensive secondary freshman player that they've had there since Mika Fitzpatrick. And, I mean, that's saying a lot when you consider the people that have played on the perimeter and at safety for Alabama. So, yeah, they can match up with anybody. And, I can't imagine. And the good news is, too, I think if you're Alabama on defense, and I know J.J. McCarthy's a pretty good athlete, but they don't technically run him. Like, that's not who they are. If he gets out of the pocket, you've got to contain him a little bit. But I don't think Alabama's got to worry about quarterback run. I think that, they're one of those football teams that traditionally can handle the box with 6 players in it and not have to bring in a 7th, not have to bring in an 8th. We'll see if that holds true. I mean, Michigan won the Joe Moore Award 2 years in a row on the offensive line. You can make the argument that this year they were every bit as productive. So that's where the game is going to be decided, I think, is as it usually is. But it's in the trenches, and can you make Michigan have to be something they don't want to be?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, and this is true of most any team in America, this is not Alabama specific, but since we're talking about Alabama's defense against Michigan's offense, if they can get pressure without blitzing, it becomes so difficult against Alabama when they don't have to commit an extra guy to pressure the quarterback. When Dallas Turner is pressuring the quarterback from the edge and they're able to get that pressure with the front 4, boy, you're in a world of hurt at that point. Now I can dedicate a lot more guys to the pass, and I'm not having to send an extra guy on pressure. Or when I do it, I've really got you in a pickle now.
Yeah, and that's kind of what separates Alabama and maybe a handful of other teams in college football from everybody else. That's the reality of the situation. And, Michigan was like, not to say that Michigan's not like that on defense this year. Michigan, I think, statistically on defense, we talked about this on our last edition, statistically it's skewed because the offensive performances in the Big Ten and their off-season schedule was their non-conference schedule was so poor on offense that I think it ramped up their numbers. But that Michigan a couple of years ago when they had Aiden Hutchinson was kind of like Alabama is now in the sense that they could just line up with 5-6 guys. They could pressure without having to bring an extra hat and control the line of scrimmage. I do think it's going to be a tall order for Alabama to consistently do that. Listen, Penn State could not consistently do that, and they're the number 1 ranked defense in the country with NFL players at the edge and at the linebacker position, just like Alabama has. So we'll see. Something's got to give there.
All right, Sugar Bowl in just a moment. This is Ball presented by MyBookie.ag. He is ESPN's Tom Lugabill. A reminder, when you sign on to MyBookie.ag, You make that initial deposit using code NEXTROUND and get a deposit match up to $1,000. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with mybookie.ag code NEXTROUND. Mybookie.ag code NEXTROUND. Also, manscaped.com. This is the handyman. This is an easy, compact travel razor. Works great in the home as well. You can couple that with all their great products, the Beard Hedger, the lawnmower, which takes care of the full body, including the undercarriage. Also, the Weed Whacker, which takes care of the nose hair and the ear hair. Great boxer shorts, male body products, all there at manscaped.com. Because you're watching ball, I'm going to give you this code BROWN20. That is my last name, Brown, and the number 20% off your first order at manscaped.com when you use code BROWN20. All right, let's flip sides with Washington and Texas. Same thing there. That Washington defense at times this year, Luginbill, was a little messy. They played when it mattered most. They were good in the, for the most part, in the Pac-12 championship game. But boy, there were a couple games this year where that Washington defense was MIA and put a ton of pressure on their offense.
Well, the 90th ranked defense, total defense in the country. And, you know, what I would call them is a bit of a bend but don't break type of team. They would come up big in the red area at times when they needed to. But consistently, they were picked on. And I think in some instances, they were pushed around. And that's not a good recipe against this Texas offense, because Texas has problems at every single position on the field. All right, they're three deep at wideout, led by Xavier Worthy. We know Jordan Whittingham is there. And then Adonai Mitchell is the guy that really was probably the unheralded best playmaker on that offense this year. When they went to him, it was a catch or it was a touchdown. And that's what he did for this offense. Then you move to the inside, and you've basically got an overinflated wide receiver in JT Sanders that is a complete and utter mismatch for just about anybody you're going to play. They're three deep at running back despite the loss of Jamal Brooks, or Jonathan Brooks, excuse me. The freshman C.J. Baxter that came in has kind of just picked up where they left off. So they've got depth there. It's the best offensive line they've had there in 20 years. The key to me is this. When Quinn Ewers is on, he is really, really good. The problem is when he's off, he's not average or mediocre. He's bad. His off is really off. And he hasn't had a ton of that this year, but he's had enough to really make you scratch your head at times. He did it against Wyoming, did it in the first half versus Rice, was like that a little bit in the middle of the year. Then he got banged up, came back, fully healthy. But if they're hitting on all cylinders, I don't know how Washington is going to hold up defensively. And the one thing about Texas is they are an offense that is explosive and can create big plays, but they can also go the length of the field and really earn it and keep the other offense on the sideline, which is what you've got to do with Washington, because what Washington wants to do is score the ball, once every three plays. I thought it was interesting as I was looking at this matchup, and somebody said, man, this Washington offense is just loaded. If I told you that Texas was ranked higher in total offense than Washington is, would you believe me?
Probably not, just because you hear so much about Rome Odunze and Michael Penix. I do know that there was a game where they scored 12 points this year. I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
Probably, if you would have said which one's ranked higher, I would have gone Washington.
Right, and it's Texas. Texas is 9, Washington's 12. And I think a lot of that is because of the season-long balance run to pass that Texas has had, where Washington's only had it really from the SC game on with Dylan Johnson. And so that's probably been the difference between the two teams. But this thing, I think, could be an absolute track meet.
Yeah.
And I think both teams can thrive in that world. The thing that's interesting about Texas is they have won games so many different ways. They've won it with offense. They've won it by running the football. They've won it by throwing the football. They've won it in the kicking game. They've won it by playing great defense and just hanging on late. They've started slow. They've finished fast. But the one thing they do is they always find a way in the fourth quarter for some reason. So I think a lot of this depends on if Quinn Ewers is hot, man. If he is, it's going to be one heck of a football game.
And I know this is a little old school to talk about things like this, but indoor fast track. I mean, you're talking about how this could be a bit of a track meet. I think the total at mybookie.ag is 64, so they're expecting a high-scoring game.
Yeah.
I do think that plays a part in it. There's going to be no weather factor. That's going to be an indoor fast track for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Who did that benefit? I don't know. Both teams. So
Yeah.
now, if it plays to both teams' strengths, who makes a critical mistake? Or who has a bad injury at the wrong time to the wrong guy? Kind of like Alabama and Jameson Williams in the SEC
Yeah.
championship game. I think it was versus
Yeah, it was
Georgia.
Mechie.
So
It was Mechie in the championship game. He got hurt actually in the championship game against
that's
Georgia.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Against Georgia. Right, right. And so, if it hits you the wrong way, listen, it can have an impact. But I think playing to the strengths of both teams, with it being, a healthy surface, you're not worried about wind, you're not worried about rain, you're not worried about cold. That helps both teams.
All right, he is ESPN's Tom Lugabill. This is Ball. It is presented, as I mentioned, by MyBookie.ag. Code next round when you sign on. You get that bonus when you sign on of up to $1,000. And you can use it right away. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag. Code next round. MyBookie.ag. Code next round. Also, apparel provided on the show by Roback.com. You can use code TNR20 to get 20% off your first order of the softest hoodies you will ever put on. The great quarter zips, the golf polos. They've got pants, crew neck shirts, all right there at Roback, roback.com. Code TNR20 to save 20% off your first order at roback.com. All right, you've had a few days to digest National Signing Day. It is now in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
Just give me a few winners in your mind. When you look back on it, you say, hey, this National Signing Day was important for what player, what program? Just give me some winners there.
Program, I would say Oregon. To have a top 5 class, number 3 for us, to pluck a receiver late, McClellan off of Ohio State's class, I thought was big. I just thought it sent a message that Oregon can play with anybody on the recruiting front nationwide.
Right.
Nationwide. And they've got a coach in Dan Lanning that knows what it takes and the type of player it's going to take to beat an Alabama, to beat a Georgia, because he's been at both places. So I thought they made huge strides. I thought Miami probably stole the day when it came to the guys they closed on late, guys they were able to flip late. Now, they had guys flip away as well, but they closed really, really well. A lot was made about KJ Bolden flipping to Georgia and off of that Florida State class. It's still a strong Florida State class. It really is. Florida getting DJ Lagway to stick around is huge. I thought South Carolina really did a nice job. I would also add that Texas Tech did a nice job. Stanford, really, what Troy Taylor did, not only on the field to improve that team, but what they've done in recruiting, really, really strong. The usual suspects that we see, Georgia, obviously. Alabama flipped a couple late that I thought was interesting. And you keep hearing me use that term, flip. Well, basically all National Signing Day is about now is the transfer portal.
Yeah.
And can you hang on to guys? We talked prior to signing day. We went into that morning. There were only 14 players in the ESPN 300 that had not committed to somebody. So I think what's happening, number one, the players are realizing that there's limited scholarships and they're starting to do the math. That's number one. Number two, they're not as hesitant to just pull the trigger and sign because they know they can walk away, right? That's the other side of this. So, in the case of a DJ Lagway, all right, well, he there's something he likes about Florida, something he likes about Billy Napier, what they're trying to build, what they're trying to do, but he also realizes there's no downside. He can walk away, and every single player in signing day can walk away now because of the transfer portal. But I do think it is important to note that some of the weight in terms of being able to leverage against the high school player is now falling back into the hands of the college coaches, because they're telling kids, listen, if you're not going to commit to us or commit to this and sign here, we're going to go replace you. Transfer portal's right there, and we can find somebody else. And I think kids are getting the message, and that's why we saw very few. We saw surprises, but not. They were flips. They weren't, somebody that hadn't signed or hadn't committed yet, and then all of a sudden goes out of nowhere and goes somewhere else. And that was kind of the story of the day.
Yeah, I remember, and we'll talk about the portal next, but I do remember, back in the day, you would send me and the other recruiting services would send me, here's the guy that's committing on our platform. You guys had a lot at ESPN, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of those guys, while there might be an obvious lean, it was still a mystery. I mean, there were still the hats on the table, and you just don't really get that much on signing day anymore. That used to be some of the most exciting parts of signing day.
Dude, we would do on average between 10 to 12 announcements in one day of kids were like, you're right, you didn't know where they were going. And again, by and large, I don't know, 50% of the ESPN 300, maybe a little bit more at times, came into the day not committed.
Yeah.
So, you had a lot of excitement, even with guys that weren't coming on our air to do it. But it's a totally different day. We had one kid on, Ernest Willer, and he committed and signed with Wisconsin. That's it, one guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. It's amazing as to what it used to be. I remember the first year they had the early signing day. I thought you'd have a few guys, but most guys would still do February. I was blown away that
70%.
Yeah, at that time, 70% is probably more now, right?
It is. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's more now. And it's taken away, remember we used to do that 12-hour live show.
Oh, yeah.
The Super Bowl of recruiting.
Yep.
And now it started with adding 2 signing periods. That diminished the excitement. Then you add the transfer portal.
Yep.
Then you add COVID and the extra year of eligibility, which screwed everybody's numbers up. And it just kind of took the air out of the balloon.
All right, we'll talk about the portal in 1 second. A reminder, the show presented by MyBookie.ag. Code next round when you sign on at MyBookie.ag. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere. Code next round is going to get you a sign-on deposit match up to $1,000. That's code next round at MyBookie.ag. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag. If you're looking for plays to use there, Lance'sLock.com is the place to go. LT has got his bowl package up right now, and there's a guarantee involved with that. Just go to Lance'sLock.com, check on that bowl package, as bowl season is in the midst of some hot games right now, and you can get hot at Lance'sLock.com. All right, let's wrap up talking about the transfer portal, something we'll have to do periodically, obviously. I want to start with Walter Nolan. He's going to Ole Miss. This is already a pretty good Ole Miss roster that was a 10-win team this year, and you've scouted Walter Nolan. You saw him at Texas A&M. He was widely regarded as one of the top players in the portal by just almost everyone that covers it. And he is going to Ole Miss. Give me your thoughts on Walter Nolan going to Ole Miss.
So he's a former number 1 overall player for us. And one of the things that I always loved and appreciated about Walter was he was never a guy that was a hype guy that walked around puffing out his chest and showing up at camps and combines, but not working out, just kind of standing out there on the sideline to be seen. And every single time that kid showed up, he suited up and he competed. He took every rep and every drill in every city that we would see him in, and he would show up just to prove he was the best guy there. One of the reasons why I think he was not only the best player in the transfer portal, might be the best player in the transfer portal the last couple of years, particularly in the defensive front, but he was also productive. That's the thing. He would have been, I think, one of the few guys that Mike Elko probably called immediately and said, hey, let's talk this thing through here, because this was not a player that was highly anticipated and highly hyped that came in and was just a marginal production guy. He's productive. So I think he adds a huge element to Ole Miss in their efforts to try to, catch up to Alabama, catch up to Georgia, because that's the difference. Ole Miss's guys can play. Their skill guys can play. Their quarterback can play. Their linebackers can play. Their corners can play with anybody. But it's the guys up front on both sides of the ball. That's where they got to play catch up, and that's where the portal helped them out here.
Malik Murphy is on. He's not going to play in the Sugar Bowl, or not going to be on the roster. He may not have played either way, but he's not going to be on the roster of the Sugar Bowl. He's going to Duke. You saw, I think, one of the games he started, right? You had on ESPN. Yeah, against Kansas State. Yeah.
No, BYU.
BYU, my apologies.
Kansas State was the following week. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
BYU. So you've seen him play, in live action there in an actual game. What does he do for Duke?
Well, he's got tremendous skill. He's big. He's got a strong arm. I hate to say this, but he's got a lot of the same physical traits as Joe Milton.
Right.
But unfortunately, he's got a lot of the other stuff too. He's very streaky. He turned it over twice against BYU in the game we had. They dropped the third interception, and then he should have probably had 4 turnovers against Kansas State. They got very fortunate. In my estimation, he's been somebody that is just too careless with the football.
Yeah.
And maybe that will clear itself up with more experience. It helped him to play 2 games this year. He had great personnel around him, and I think he understood the role he was in. They didn't have to press and try and do everything on his own. But he's probably an upgrade over what Duke has with Grayson Loftus and, losing Riley Leonard. But I need to see him become more consistently accurate and become a more consistently productive player too. His physical attributes are there. Let's see if he can become more productive.
I realize as I'm about to ask you this question, these things can change so quickly. So by the time someone is watching this, this could have already been announced, and the speculation could be wrong. But I saw speculation over the weekend that the Tagovailoa family would like to see Talia playing at Miami. Obviously, his brother Tua, the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins, but playing for the Miami Hurricanes. Would that be a good landing spot, you think, for Talia Tagovailoa?
Yeah, because I think the offense and Shannon Dawson and what they do is really good. It's fast. It's innovative. Probably plays to his strengths. They just brought in an outstanding wide receiver haul with some freshmen that I think are going to play right away. So the answer to that question depends on whether or not Miami thinks that he's an upgrade.
Yeah.
He would be an addition that makes them better, you know.
And Van Dyke is going to Wisconsin, so there's an obvious opening there.
Oh yeah, there's a need. There's a need there, and I think that's a good landing spot for Van Dyke. Quite honestly,
yeah,
too. I thought
really,
he found himself a good home there.
Yeah, well, Graham Mertz just never panned out there over those years. You know, that was
highest profile guy they ever signed at the quarterback position, and it was kind of like what you see is what you get. But I will give him credit; he was a bit of a different guy at Florida this year. Before he got hurt, he was actually playing pretty good football.
I know. Yeah, you're right about that. He was playing his best football, maybe, but I just, Wisconsin's just one of those places. Russell Wilson, obviously, as a transfer, was very, very good there. But by and large, man, their quarterback play has just been really, at best, average. That's like the best you would get is average.
Well, and that offense now is completely different with Phil Longo running.
Yeah.
I said the moment he got hired, I said, I love the hire. I think that's going to be fun to watch them on offense. Where are you going to get the skill players at Wisconsin to run that thing? I don't know. I don't know. And I thought Tanner Mordecai at SMU was a great addition for them, but then he gets hurt. And so time will tell as we watch Wisconsin over the next 2 to 3 years to see how quickly they can upgrade their skill on offense.
Yeah, because Mordecai had torn it up at SMU. I mean, he had like that 9-touchdown passing game under Rhett Lashley. And again, you get to Wisconsin, and it's just, he and Mertz, the last two quarterbacks there, just has not worked out.
Right, no doubt.
All right, he is ESPN's Tom Lugabill. This is Ball. It is presented by MyBookie.ag. Code next round when you sign on at MyBookie.ag. You make your initial deposit. They match it up to $1,000. That is MyBookie.ag. Code next round. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag. All right, Luke, thanks for the time. We'll see you next time.
All right, buddy. Thank you.